have some to I'm getting fired up. So thank you again for just your time, for one, realizing that there are multiple priorities, especially at the end of the year, as we try to get those, last minute, or not last minute, but more so kind of pushes for end of year annual campaigns, event campaigns, and whatnot. So I really put this together thinking of you all and the sense of what would be most valuable to your work as grant writers. It sounds to me, just if you don't mind, that you are all, I guess, pretty experienced in grant writing, as far as the actual the narrative and the writing component. And what I hope to bring is more of that cultivation and relationship building that is just as equally as beneficial, because at the end of the day, we're not looking for people to participate, but really to help, as Lori and I were first talking, really walk with us through the journey of our organization and the mission that you all support and promote in the community. Does that sound like a good direction of where we go? Well, perfect. So I'll share a little bit more about my work and more so my experience. Again, in starting this conversation, folks were like, "Well, how exactly did you get to where you are and what you're doing?" And so I'm happy to just share my evolution as being a professional in the social sector and this work, and having the opportunity to work on different sides of the table in promoting causes that I'm passionate for. I will also really bring in, and this is kind of the nuts and bolts of the presentation, the funder aspect. From serving as a program officer, seeing how decisions are made, seeing how the networking, the education, and the information that grantee prospects and partners really bring into the conversation and the development of grants, and really the resources that go back into your organization and are pushed out into the community. I'll also speak about what I saw in reviewing both grant proposals and evaluations. And some of these you may find and you're like, "Oh my gosh, that really happened?" Yes, it does. I would say that's probably minimum. But just to keep in mind as you begin to identify potential prospects, as well as actually complete applications, and as well as reporting back to your funders. And then lastly, I will close with hopefully just some words of inspiration, again, of the work that you do, and the support and the nurturing of really developing a narrative of what your organizations and its programs helps catalyze in our community. And I see that I have questions and answers there at the end, but I'm open to having this as more of a conversation, if that's okay. And so feel free to interject with questions, as well as any clarification, or if you want to go a little bit deeper, and I'm happy to to speak to that, and also share that maybe that is not my experience, and if there is somebody with that can speak to a particular topic, please do jump in. I think that this is a learning experience not only for you all, but for me as a presenter as well. The field of philanthropy, as well as our community, is constantly changing, and we really are here. Organizations like GPA are part of that learning network. So thank you again for having me here. So I will start with myself and I guess my work. So at the core, I'm a capacity builder. I have had the opportunity to work as a professional fundraiser. That's how I got into my work in the social sector. I started off as a resource development officer at the United Way of Metropolitan Dallas, which was phenomenal and a phenomenal experience. I will say that I started off as a temporary hire. They were going through a capital campaign, and at the time I knew nothing of fundraising, and had the development director and the executive director told me that I was asking people for money, I probably would have walked right out that door, and who knows, may have been in a different industry. But instead what they shared, and I take this to me, and this is really my mantra in my work in supporting socially motivated missions, is you are connecting opportunity to resources. And that became a lot more real, and I was able to understand the plethora of services that were provided in the community, as well as some of the challenges, but I was also able to make connections of how that related to me, my family, my experience as in both being a recipient, a scholarship recipient from a family foundation, like the Long Foundation. I had no idea, and but being able to make that more real. And so after that, I moved from Dallas to Austin, and this was in the early 2000s, and at that time I began the first full-time fundraising coordinator was my name, which, as we all know, as fundraising professionals and grant writers, it means you do whatever is necessary. So I did grants, I helped with board development. We had a very active working board who was very involved in fundraising, and the executive director, so I was able to support them and see that synergy. I also ran events, did a little bit of everything, penned annual campaigns, communications. As I was sharing with Vanessa, I was a little bit more of a spring chicken, and it was a great time because I also got to see and help build the process for a new, or that organization was 15 years old, but a new department for this organization that, as we know, to this day is continuing, it's robust and bold work in Central Texas and throughout the nation. And so at that time, I had always known, and even before then, that I wanted to go continue my post-secondary work. I honestly thought that my path was going to be law school because I really enjoyed the community engagement component. But then I started to look more into policy schools, and given my experience in frontline fundraising and what I was really looking for in that community engagement component was not necessarily law, but this was at the same time that the RGK Center for Philanthropy and Community Service had a few years underneath its belt, and was also promoting a certificate in nonprofit management, that I decided to go that route. And I still collaborate. I don't know if there are any other people maybe who are here today that have either are a graduate of the LBJ School, the RGK Center, or perhaps taken a training or been involved in one of their events. That really gave me the bird's eye view of the social sector, the variety of ways that we work with both the business and the government sector. It was at that time during my graduate study that I took on an internship to work for a startup family foundation. So that's where I kind of came into the other side of the table. At that time, they were looking specifically for someone who had done grant writing, because they wanted to understand what were some of the ways that help support an organization, again, the capacity, but not burden the work with reports and all the other hoops that we need to jump through, and have more and create more of a learning culture. And so that's kind of the evolution of my work, and where that brings me today. I still see my work in Civic Aim in working with small staff funders. A majority of them are family foundations, but also private foundations and giving circles that truly are wanting to move from a transactional entity, but to a more of a learning partner with their organizations that they support, or a particular cause that they would like to advance. The work that I do with funders are really around grants management. I do a lot of landscape review if there's a specific giving priority that they are interested in or would like to delve in further. I also handle, particularly for one funder, all of their evaluation components in managing both interim and final evaluations, and then pulling in that information for both the executive director and her board, again, so that they are able to reflect and listen and learn of how their investments can best support an organization and cause. I also am a trained facilitator, and specifically for multi-generational family. Over the last couple of years, and I've run Civic Aim, I'm now going into my 7th year, but I've seen over the last 3 years, much more of my strategic planning facilitation is moving towards succession planning, where they're having either the next generation come in and start to kind of try on for size their board role and their vision, to also working with organizations or particular funders that have decided to sunset their foundation. And so that all said, I have tried to weave each one of those perspectives or learnings and experiences into this conversation. So again, I want to open it up, and if you inquire for further clarification or a little bit more of that backstory, please do let me know. Okay, now we'll move on. So first I want to start as, I want to hear a little bit more about you and your work, and as a fundraiser, and as a grants writer. If you could just share with me, and in no particular order, just what are some of the things that you find yourself doing on a day-to-week basis?
Okay, tracking numbers constantly, whether it's service numbers or dollars, but constant tracking, comparing, adjusting.
Yeah. Analysis, tracking and analysis is kind of monitoring that your programs are moving forward as I said. And thank you, Lori.
Researching opportunities.
Right, kind of doing your homework, delving in a little bit deeper and other things. And again, that landscape review, who else is in this? What else is going on? Not only seeing where the trends are, but also operationally what your organization's strategy is and capacity to fulfill that.
Giving prospective funders a tour of our facility or visiting with them if they have a headquarters.
Building relationships, right? Helping either identify where they're either prospects or cultivating, informing, educating.
Writing.
The obvious.
And the footnote to the writing is cutting words out of what you've written.
Synthesize.
Meet character and word counts, yes.
That's correct. No, you're exactly right. The communication component, right? That method is in the narrative and trying to pull together the most compelling yet solid case for the project, the organization, the new initiative that has yet to go that you're trying to help develop. So, so great. These are great. Anything else that we?
I do a lot of like rechecking my work. It's like making sure all of, after the application's done, that I've like actually answered the questions and that I've provided the right information. And I mean that I usually take a whole day if I can to do that, so that we're not disqualified for something that could have easily been fixed or seen.
Melody, you're godsend.
I spend a lot of time tracking what I've done, just in Salesforce or what have you.
Yes. Revising, refining, optimizing, to your component. I'm not putting too much energy and time here where maybe it should be elsewhere. Is there truly a return on investment on the time that we're putting, towards this grant, or perhaps the reporting component? So great. Oh.
And one other thing I'd bring up is I spend a lot of time explaining what I do to other staff members and to board members. So it's never just a short yes and no answer when they ask me about something.
Well, and related to that, building relationships with program staff, and also helping them think through, what their needs are, and the design of a program.
But also conversing with them on the effects of existing programs so that I better understand the stories behind everything that we do and how lives are impacted so that I can then portray that to the community.
So yes, in a lot of your work, you are kind of that translator, that connector, and both internally and externally with the stakeholders that you work and support. So thank you for giving me just some food for thought that will go into this presentation. So now I want to share with you what a typical week for a funder and program officer is. And I share this in both experience, but also in working with funder colleagues that professionally staff organizations, as well as do this in a volunteer capacity. And so I'm going to kind of give you just generalizations based on my experience. I will share with you that I've worked with over 24 funding entities, and so I think my N is pretty big with regard to, at least, maybe not statistically sound, but does give you just like the breadth of work of what the funder's side looks like in perspective. So that said, these are a couple of the clients that I work with. And, so here, what you see is a local funder, and it's their board, and they are actually having a one-on-one luncheon with their program participants, really trying to kind of go beyond beyond the grant, beyond the reporting, and speak to the program participants to really hear what's that transformation that is occurring or not occurring, and how can we help. And so here you have, this is actually a coalition of funders, Texas Education Grantmakers Advocacy Consortium. They are at the Capitol steps advocating on behalf of their grantee programs to legislators and policymakers, really helping kind of amplify the mission and the importance of quality public education for this specific component or experience. Here you have two family foundations, as well as larger community organizations, nonprofits, like the I Live Here, I Give Here, RGK Center, that are holding knowledge building conferences that are on behalf of nonprofit organizations, really helping with both the behind the scenes as well as the programmatic offerings of this conference. Here in this picture, you see a family going through a strategic planning process, really thinking about, in this family, they're out of the Gulf Coast. They have been in 30 years of funding and have, over the last 5 years, have transitioned their board to engage a younger demographic of their family. And in this picture right here, they're actually conversing about what was learned, what are ways that the new board members can learn not only about the issues, but also connect with some of the community organizations that they support. And really thinking of, reflecting about that and then refining what their strategic plan is moving forward. And here you're talking about the writing, the obvious. This is a family foundation that's there, and this was actually kind of refreshing, and I don't know if this is a good thing or bad thing, but their office desks were just as piled with papers and reports and things that they're reading. Because at the end of the day, they are stewards, just as you are stewards of the funds that you receive, stewards for the funds of the organizations that they represent, ensuring that they too do their due diligence, that they too follow through with the work, the vision, the plans that was asked of them, of their board. So I share that in the sense that in my experience of being in philanthropy, there's always this, or at least in my experience, and I would be curious to hear if there are other diverse experiences, but there's always this wall between the nonprofit service providers and the funders. And more what I've learned is that, and that maybe not all, but I would say the growing trend are that, that movement and the philosophy of funders that are wanting to become more engaged and proactive and understand and have an open communication partnership of what's going on versus kind of the ivory tower, send me an LOI application and whatnot. And that's not to say that they're not there, but it is really refreshing to see funders who are wanting to become more engaged and explore ways that they can help catalyze missions and causes that align with their philanthropic intent. So that said, is that different from any of your experiences? Okay. So this is generally speaking how foundations operate. This is pulled both from experience and research. My background is actually in capacity building in the philanthropic sector. And when you look at small foundations, and there's tends to be more small foundations than not, and small being in not only asset size, but also just staff capacity, where they have few to no staff. And I would say that is the lion's share of the overall foundation population in the United States. But for those, so that said, I'll focus more on the small foundations, but also kind of bring on nuances of the large foundations. And this is specifically targeting both family foundations, independent foundations where there are there are no blood relatives, or if there are, the board is also comprised of community leaders, as well as corporate foundations and community foundations. So this encompasses those different facets of philanthropic entities. Small foundations, they tend to keep a lower profile, in large part because they don't have the capacity or the infrastructure to be as visible as they want. They may or may not have a website. And if they do not, more than likely they have either members of the board or paid staff that go out and really try to keep those community connections alive and start them, initiate them. You also see that smaller foundations, they tend to give locally, and they also tend to give to those causes that they've either experienced or someone within their network has connected with. Again, smaller entities, or the foundations, there is a much steadier bridge to connect with them, either by identifying who's on their board and really doing that crosswalk of who within our network may know their network and maybe can help facilitate an introduction and or a conversation. Versus your larger foundations where you have more levels of management and frontline program officers. But that said, with large foundations, you're able to just kind of keep a feel for where they're going strategically, what they're giving to, without having to go pull their 990s and see, perhaps in a lot of cases, your larger staffed foundations and those that are more visible actually have an annual report, if not even have a blog like the Michael and Susan Dell Foundation or St. David's Foundation. I mean, they're readily communicating with the community and letting them in on key conversations and decisions. You also see that larger foundations happen to give, to more geographically open areas or more expansive. For larger foundations, particularly those that are staffed, some of their reporting mechanisms are more focused on quantitative and not only the qualitative component, because you actually have program officers that are reading this and are a part of that change, as well as an actual evaluation and formal reporting process that is asked that may be not asked of in smaller foundations. And in large part because of the staffing and the capacity for them to be able to do that. But on both senses, it's, the reason that we're here is to focus on, well, how do we develop and cultivate a relationship with them? How do we get on their radar to let them know of our work that we're doing? So some facts about the foundation. Here I shared, there's over 86,000 foundations and funding entities within the U.S. A lion's share of them have assets less than 5 million, with 66% under 1 million. Again, so really to kind of put into perspective, going back to what Christy was sharing, management of your time to ensure that, that maybe if these funders that you are looking at prospecting, are they a fit? Do we want to continue down this line? Because again, you've got 86,000 other funders that might be a better fit and prospect. Most of these are, of the funding entities, are family foundations. What I thought really interesting was that more than half of them were created over the last 12 years. So this is, if you think about the nonprofit sector itself, we've probably been professionals, like I say probably, these are true numbers. We have been professional over the last 30, 40 years. We think of organizations like the one that you are a part of today, Grant Professionals Association, where there's actually accreditations, there's continuing education, there's fields of study. The funder side is also catching up with that. And so again, when you think about that relationship, that benefit, that value add that you bring to the table in connecting funders with you is that you're helping inform and educate them. And I really feel that that's something that, that you need to arm with you, because it is you and the organization that you represent that are at that ground level and are witnessing the change, seeing and identifying both the opportunities and the obstacles that a funder who is not perhaps as inclined or experienced as you and the teams that you are a part of. Also, what is important, and as grant writers, probably all know this, but at the end of the day, foundations have to give 5%, at least 5% of their average assets annually. So that can be, if we're looking at those numbers where it says 66% are around $1 million, so people are probably pushing out anywhere between $100,000 to $1 million every single year. And they can only do that if they know who to give to. And that's your role and the role that you are a part of with a team if you have a development office that has other professionals. And so the ways to do that are to ensure that they know about your organization. In large part, it may be sending information, whether it is getting them on your email newsletter or inviting them to one of your community conversations or connections. I'm starting to see a lot more. I serve on a board of Todos Juntos, and we're having Café con Todos Juntos. And it is a way to cultivate new relationships, let people know that are interested in immigrant issues to come and learn about the center, but also more about the overall issue. And so I'm starting to see more of that percolate. You also, some of the best ways to get in front of people is identify, again, who within your orbit knows that network. In large part, it's kind of crosswalking who serves on a particular foundation's board with who does our board know, or who might be the best person. It might be maybe a board member, it may be a volunteer or an advocate, it may be a past donor to help either shape the introduction or actually reach out to that potential prospect. So those are just a couple of ways to get in front of people, and there's no silver bullet, and the timing is always really important. And so to that, I'd say being thoughtful and continuing to beat the drum of your work and where you're going and what you're doing, and being as visible and articulate as you can. So say that you get in front of a